Have you ever felt like the more you understand, the more alone you become? Not because people walk away, but because there's less and less you can say that truly connects. You notice it in the small things. A dinner table full of noise but no real dialogue. A meeting where people nod at the obvious and ignore the essential. A group of friends laughing over things you can't find funny anymore. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. It doesn't mean you're better. It just means you're starting to see. And that seeing, clear, honest, unfiltered, isn't always welcome in a world addicted to comfort. You start asking questions others would rather avoid. You bring up ideas that unsettle. You notice the contradictions in what people celebrate and what they ignore. And slowly, the air shifts. People grow quieter around you. Conversations feel more surface level. Invitations become less frequent. You're not imagining it. You're not broken. You're just awakening to a deeper layer of life. History is full of people like this. Socrates labeled dangerous for simply asking too many questions. Galileo silenced for pointing a telescope in the right direction. Tesla cast aside because his vision didn't serve the profits of the powerful. They weren't enemies of society, they were its mirror. And most people don't like what they see when the mirror gets too honest. There's a strange truth here. We admire strength, we envy wealth, we're fascinated by beauty. But intelligence, real, unflinching, uncomfortable intelligence, is often met with suspicion, or worse, silence. Because when someone truly sees, they don't just reveal what's ahead, they reveal what we've ignored, what we've denied, what we've hidden from ourselves. And that is terrifying. It's not your words that isolate you, it's your presence. It's not what you say, it's what your existence implies, that there's more, that we've settled, that we're sleepwalking. And some people would rather never wake up. So if you've ever felt the loneliness that comes with clarity, the isolation that comes with depth, the resistance that meets your truth, don't let it make you smaller. It's not a curse. It's a sign you're on a path most people are too afraid to walk. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly why it matters. Imagine standing in a room full of people, sharing a thought that took you years to shape, a truth you've wrestled with, refined, tested against your own soul. You speak, not to impress, but to connect. And what greets you is not curiosity, but silence, shrugs, glances that say, "Can we talk about something else?" This is not because you've said something wrong. It's because you've said something real. Society doesn't fear intelligence in theory. It fears what intelligence exposes in practice. When someone lifts heavy weights, we admire them. When someone builds great wealth, we aspire to follow. But when someone speaks a truth that pierces illusions, the room goes cold. Why? Because intelligence, real penetrating intelligence, isn't just an asset. It's a disruption. It doesn't politely wait for permission. It doesn't cushion the truth with applause. It cuts through pretenses and exposes what most people would rather not see. And that's the problem. Most people don't walk through life searching for truth. They search for comfort, for rhythm, for routines that numb the chaos of existence. A deep thinker interrupts that. They ask, why do we do this? They wonder, what are we avoiding? They observe, this feels shallow. What's underneath it? It's not the questions that offend, it's what those questions reveal. The hollowness beneath habits, the contradictions in values, the lies we've told ourselves to sleep at night. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we feel when confronted with truths that clash with our identity. And human beings are wired to avoid that discomfort at almost any cost. This is why society resists people who think too deeply. Not because they're wrong, but because they make others feel wrong. There's a difference between being smart and being aware. Smart people can impress, aware people disturb. And when awareness walks into a room, everyone feels it. It's not about IQ, it's about presence. About the way deep thinkers move through the world, questioning, noticing, refusing to settle for easy answers. That presence becomes a mirror, one that shows others what they've ignored in themselves. And mirrors, when they reflect too clearly, are often turned to the wall. So if you've ever shared something true, something raw, something that mattered, and felt the air grow tense, It's not you, it's the mirror you became, and most people aren't ready to look. There's something deeply unsettling about being around someone who truly sees you, not in the superficial sense, not your appearance, your job title, your curated personality, but the parts you keep hidden, the doubts, the contradictions, the unspoken discomforts. Deep thinkers do this without trying, just by existing. This is what psychologists refer to as the mirror effect. It's not about judgment, it's about reflection. When someone with intellectual depth enters a space, they don't have to speak to provoke unease. Their presence alone acts as a subtle challenge. It whispers, "Have you thought deeper? Have you questioned this? Are you being honest with yourself?" And most people aren't prepared for that kind of confrontation, especially not with themselves. There's a strange pattern you'll begin to notice. If someone is taller than you might admire their genetics. If they're wealthier, you might envy their success. But if they're clearly thinking on a higher level, you don't just compare. You question your own mind. Because intelligence, unlike beauty or wealth, touches the very core of identity. We define ourselves by what we believe, what we value, how we interpret the world. When someone questions those foundations, even without words, it can feel like a personal attack. That's why people become defensive. That's why they interrupt, dismiss, or mock what they don't understand. That's why silence follows truth more often than applause. It's not because deep thinkers are arrogant. It's because their presence exposes how much others are pretending. This is where ego comes in. The ego doesn't want truth. It wants affirmation. It doesn't want depth. It wants safety. And a deep thinker, even without intending to, becomes a threat to that safety. They don't play the social games. They don't chase status. They don't flatter to belong. They stand quietly, aligned with their values, comfortable in solitude, guided by something deeper than approval. That stillness, that clarity makes people nervous because it says there's a different way to live, one without masks, one without noise. And if that's true, then what have the rest of us been doing? That's the real fear, not the deep thinker's words, but what those words reveal about the listener. So next time you're met with resistance, with mockery, with rejection, with that quiet social distancing that follows a moment of depth, know this: you didn't fail to connect. You simply held up a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial, not because he dislikes people, but because the more he sees, the harder it is to pretend." Schopenhauer wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was trying to describe a quiet agony, the experience of those who cannot unsee what they've seen, who can't laugh at small talk, who can't find comfort in surface-level routines, who crave depth in a world that avoids it. He believed that most people are driven by what he called the will to live, the instinctual pursuit of pleasure, comfort, and survival. But the rare few, those with heightened intellect, often develop something else, the will to truth. And that's where the fracture begins. Because the will to truth isn't glamorous. It doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't always bring joy. It brings clarity. And clarity, more often than not, brings discomfort. Where others chase validation, the deep thinker chases understanding. Where others seek escape, the deep thinker seeks meaning. Where others follow the script, the deep thinker questions the story. This kind of awareness creates distance, not because the deep thinker wants to be distant, but because their hunger for truth makes them incompatible with distraction. They see through manipulation. They notice when people say one thing and mean another. They sense when ambition is hollow, when excitement is forced, when connections are built on convenience instead of depth. And that makes social interaction exhausting, because most of society runs on unspoken agreements. Agreements to not go too deep, not ask too much, not challenge what keeps the machine running. A deep thinker violates those agreements just by being sincere. This is why they often feel alien in group settings, but come alive in solitude. Not because they don't want connection, but because they can't tolerate pretense. They crave conversations that strip away masks, questions that matter, ideas that disturb and heal all at once. And in the absence of those things, they turn inward. Schopenhauer didn't see this as weakness, he saw it as wisdom. To embrace solitude not as exile, but as sanctuary. To choose quality over quantity in relationships. To accept that some truths will cost you company, but give you yourself in return. So if your mind leads you into isolation, not because you want to leave the world, but because the world no longer speaks your language, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're aligned with something the world forgot how to value. And that is not a curse. It's the beginning of freedom. Throughout history, some of the greatest minds have walked alone, not by choice, but by consequence. They questioned what others accepted. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. They predicted truths that society wasn't ready to hear. And for that, they were exiled, not always physically, but intellectually, spiritually, silently. Socrates was one of them. He didn't write books, he asked questions. He didn't offer comfort, he offered clarity. He challenged the lazy thinking of his time, forcing people to examine their beliefs instead of borrowing them. But his city, Athens, didn't thank him for it. They put him on trial, accused him of corrupting the youth, gave him poison to drink. His real crime? He made people think. Galileo turned a telescope toward the sky and saw the truth, that the earth wasn't the center of the universe. The church couldn't allow it, because if he was right, everything they claimed to control would be in question. So they silenced him, locked him in his home, told him to deny what he saw with his own eyes. He lived the rest of his life under house arrest for seeing too far, too clearly. Then there was Nietzsche, called mad in his time. His ideas about morality, about power, about the illusions of culture were too sharp, too unflinching, too honest. He saw that most people build their lives on borrowed values, and he dared to say, you can create your own. But people weren't ready to hear that, so they dismissed him. Now his words shaped philosophy, psychology, literature. Tesla dreamed of giving the world free energy. He wasn't motivated by profit, but by possibility. And for that, the system turned against him. Powerful men saw him as a threat. They buried his work, mocked his ideas, stole his inventions. He died broke, alone, forgotten, until history woke up. Even Alan Turing, who cracked the Nazi code, shortened a war, saved millions, was destroyed by his own country, not because he failed them, but because of who he loved. They punished his brilliance, and it cost him his life. These names are revered now, but only because time passed, only because their truths no longer threaten the status quo. While they lived, they were warnings, proof that thinking too deeply, seeing too clearly, loving too honestly could cost you everything. So if the world misunderstands you, isolates you, underestimates you, you are not alone. You are in the company of giants. But what if the problem isn't just with individuals? What if the very systems we live in are built to suppress deep thought? Take a closer look. Schools claim to value intelligence, but what do they reward? Not questioning, memorizing. Not original thought, compliance. Students who challenge the lesson plan, who ask the uncomfortable questions, are often labeled as distractions, troublemakers, too much. And so, from a young age, children learn that depth is dangerous. That curiosity must be edited. That blending in is safer than standing out. The workplace follows suit. Most corporations don't want innovators. They want aligners. People who maintain the structure, not question it. People who follow the script, not rewrite it. Have you ever noticed how the most intelligent employee is often not the one who gets promoted? It's the one who fits, who adapts, who plays the game. Because organizations fear disruption more than they value truth. Even politics proves this. Leaders who speak with nuance, who challenge their base, who tell hard truths, they rarely win. But those who offer simple answers, loud certainty, and easy enemies, they rise. Not because they're right, but because they're palatable. The same dynamic plays out on social media. Algorithms don't reward depth. They reward outrage. Not critical thinking, but emotional reaction. Viral content is rarely the product of deep insight. It's crafted for speed, for scale, for shock. And in this environment, the deep thinker struggles because their words require time. Their thoughts need space. Their insights don't fit into 15-second sound bites, so they're overlooked or misquoted or ignored altogether. We live in a culture that claims to celebrate intelligence, but only when it's entertaining, monetizable, or safe. The true thinkers, the ones who don't care about applause, who prioritize clarity over consensus, they don't go viral, they go unheard. And this isn't just unfortunate, it's dangerous. Because when a society silences its truth tellers, it loses its compass. It drifts, it forgets how to see. So if you feel out of place in school and work in the world for thinking too deeply, you are not defective. You are responding, honestly, to a system that was never designed for you. And that awareness, painful as it is the beginning of something far more powerful than fitting in. It's the beginning of waking up. So what can a deep thinker do? If the world resists depth, if institutions reward compliance, if social settings punish honesty, does that mean you must hide who you are? Not at all. But it does mean you must be wise. Not every place deserves your insight. Not every moment is the right moment to speak. Not every audience will understand or even want to. That's not cynicism, it's discernment. The Stoics understood this well. They believed in speaking with purpose, not for approval, not for argument, but for alignment with virtue. They didn't seek to win crowds, they sought to live rightly. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but he often wrote only for himself. He knew the value of clarity over clamor, of depth over display. Epictetus reminded his students that we cannot control the reactions of others, only the integrity of our own actions. So what does that look like today? It means you learn when to be silent, not out of fear, but out of strength. It means you protect your inner world, even when the outer world doesn't understand it. It means you find your tribe, not in popularity, but in resonance. You may not find them at the party, but you will find them in books, in quiet corners, in conversations that go long into the night, in the few, not the many. It means you learn to translate your thoughts, not dumb them down, but make them digestible. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Let your wisdom be accessible, not for attention, but for impact. And most importantly, remember this. The point is not to be understood by everyone. The point is to remain aligned with yourself, even if you are understood by no one. That is the Stoic way. To act from principle, not popularity. To live with clarity, not clamor. To walk alone, if necessary, but never without purpose. So if you have ever questioned your place, if you have ever felt unseen, unheard, unwelcome, you are not failing. You are remembering who you are, and that in a world built on illusion is a radical act of truth.